Make the outside pattern for the shell, I started out by doing a quick sketch of each piece and numbering them. I actually had to split number 11 and 15 into two pieces because they wouldn't bend correctly around the shell in the corners. Once I got that done, the next step was to draw a rough pattern on pieces of paper and cut them out. I then put them on top of the shell to see exactly how they would fit, and then made appropriate adjustments, trimming them so that they would fit correctly. Once I had all the patterns where I liked them, I laid them onto the foam. I actually took the time to try to arrange them to use as much space on the foam as possible in order to waste as little foam as possible. Then once I got all the patterns traced out onto the foam, I cut them out. I actually used scissors for this, however I would recommend using a sharp utility knife to get a lot smoother edges. In order to shape the foam, I would use a heat gun to heat it up. You have to make sure not to heat it up too much, otherwise it will burn, and basically once it turns black you know you've gone too long. But basically you want to heat it up enough to where it's not burning but it's still bendable. And then you want to bend it slightly past the shape that you want, because it will flex back a little bit, and hold it for about 10 to 20 seconds. Once I got everything cut out, it was time to sand up the edges. You can use a Dremel like is shown here, or you could also use sandpaper. I actually ended up doing the majority of it with sandpaper because I thought it got a more consistent sand around the edges than the Dremel did, and also I just didn't want to burn up the Dremel because I didn't know how long it would last. However, I guess you could really use whichever one you wanted. It would just be more of a matter of preference, and also each tool leaves a slightly different texture, so depending on the project you might want a different look. For the chest plate, I used a similar process where I started off by sketching out a few different designs to see which one I liked, and then once I picked one, I measured out the rough dimensions and wrote them down on the piece of paper. Once I had that done, I used those dimensions and several pieces of paper that was taped together in order to trace out a life-size version of it before I actually put it on the foam, and then I cut it out and laid it over the foam and traced it like I did with the pieces for the back of the shell. Then, like before, I just cut it out of the foam, and that gave me a basic shape for the front of the chest. Now, since this piece was rather long, I had to do something about it because it kind of hindered your movement, especially when you sat down. So what I decided to do was to take the top and the bottom and separate them into two different pieces. I then used some elastic straps to hold the two pieces together by putting the bottom piece over top the top piece. Then when I finish, I will later put a belt over top of it attached to the lower piece so you can't really tell that it's two different pieces. Once I got that piece done, I used the Dremel to carve out some more details in the front of the chest pieces. Suit I'm working on, I've just got foam attached to this shirt. You can use really any tight long sleeve shirt. And I still got to make some adjustments, but you can get a rough idea of how it works.